Good morning, everyone. Jim Laird here from Largo, Florida. It's really funny. I have to have a towel here because it's so muggy. I get so sweaty out here that if I don't wipe my fingers down, the mouse pad won't work. So it's pretty hilarious. So first off, Dr. Stillman on tomorrow's live. We will not be live. Well, it will be live. It'll be coming live on our channel. But Dr. Stillman is going to be on Allison Morrow's live show at 9 a.m. So, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're watching this on Facebook, I don't think it'll stream on Twitter, but you'll be able to watch him there speak with her about some interesting stuff, interesting surveys the CDC has sent out. Make sure you go down in the description and check out the set a reminder for the thyroid webinar we're doing. That's about the thyroid course that we are doing at the end of the month. We're going to tell you about how it's going to help you if you've got some thyroid things. Today's discussion is based on an Instagram post that I shared. A guy named Michael Finch shared this picture at the beach of a sign that said, "There's no such thing as a safe tan. Protect yourself from the evil sun." And so I shared that, and it's gotten a little bit of traction on Instagram. So you can go by there and check it out. Read the comments. It's pretty interesting. But this is something Dr. Stillman and I are constantly answering questions about, is the sun. And disclaimer, there is literally, you can die from too much oxygen. You can die from too much water. The poison is always in the dose, right? And when Dr. Stillman gets on here, we'll start going through a lot of the science and stuff. But the biggest problem people have today is they don't spend any time outside and then they go burn, right? Which is the equivalent of, running a marathon without training for it. And you can do that, but you're probably going to end up fractured feet and fractured shins and stuff, right? But part of the problem is they've scared people away from the sun. If you want to basically make your body more resilient to handle more sun, which you need more sun, people don't understand the darker your skin, the more sun you need. And this is something that African Americans haven't been told. One of the reasons they struggle in places like New York and in Canada and all these northern latitudes is because even if they stood outside naked, all day in the sun in Cleveland, they aren't going to get enough UV. They're designed to handle tons of UV. That's why they're dark. The lighter your skin, the less UV you need. But that doesn't mean you don't need sun still. You still need sun. But in particular, most humans, modern humans, are not getting the mornings and the evenings, which are the healing parts of the spectrum, in particular the morning where you get that morning light. So people are so scared of the sun that it's actually becoming a huge detriment. If you look at, the numbers of if you look at these countries like England, there he is.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello, Dr. Stillman. I just went through a little sun spiel about solar calluses and running marathons without training. Where did this? I also told people you're going to be on Allison Morrow tomorrow. Cool. Where did from my understanding, this fear of UV light came from them putting cells in a petri dish and then basically baking it with UV light. Is that understanding correct? Am I wrong on that? Where'd this fear come from?
I mean, yes and no. So there's a number of strong. You got to reconnect your Facebook page. It's been giving you notices for days. You got minutes.
No. It's on there. It's going.
I know it is, but it says in a few minutes, StreamYard will lose access to Facebook account. Jim Laird strength and conditioning. It
said in 2 hours. Yeah, I'm going to fix it. Don't worry. I tried to fix it the other day and it wouldn't let me. So
anyway,
that's not very
melanoma. There's key risk factors for melanoma, and the bottom line with these risk factors is basically the amount of solar damage that you take to your skin from the sun. And when I say damage, I'm very careful to say that. It might be better to say number of sunburns. There's also stronger associations, if I recall correctly, with sunburns in adolescence and childhood. And let's back up for a minute and ask ourselves, if the sun causes skin cancer, then who should have the most skin cancer? Lifeguards, people with a history of lifeguarding,
Outdoor workers.
Electrical line workers, construction workers, farm workers, agricultural workers, but we don't actually see that. And they've looked at it very consistently in the electrical line worker industry, and they don't have an increased risk of melanoma. And they very clearly say that we don't understand why they don't have an increased risk of melanoma. What you'll also see is that UVA light from tanning beds is associated with melanoma. Now, the problem with this, right, is that who's using tanning beds? If you have ever been to a gym, you may have seen that they have a tanning bed there or tanning booth. People who are getting tans are interested in looking a certain way, performing a certain way, appearing a certain way. They're taking pre-workout. They're doing performance-enhancing drugs. They're doing crazy things with pharmaceuticals in order to cut or bulk or lean out or whatever. These are not necessarily healthy people, right? And guess where they're working out? Indoors under fake blue artificial light without red and infrared light. If the sun causes the majority of skin cancers, then we would expect for people who get the most sun exposure to have the most skin cancers. But as I've just explained, that doesn't necessarily follow. The other thing is you got to pay attention to what are you really concerned about? I'll often ask people, would you rather have melanoma or colon cancer? And they'll say, well, I don't know. Think about it though. About 7,000 people a year in the United States die of melanoma. With early detection, the 1 to 2 year survival is now like 93% or something like that. With colon cancer, it's also high because we have colonoscopies. But would you rather go to your dermatologist and have them look you over once a year, as I just did a few weeks ago? I'm actually waiting for the biopsy results right now for my doctor to call me back. Would you rather have that, or would you rather have a colonoscopy? I know I would rather go to the dermatologist and have something cut out of me occasionally. So it's the easiest cancer to detect. There's a high survival rate, and it kills a relatively low number of people because of this. When you look at colon cancer, lung cancer, brain cancer, these are diseases that are correlated with low vitamin D levels. And many of them increase also autoimmune diseases and allergies the further and further and further you get away from the equator, where the sun is most intense, and people often get more of it and have more burns. So there's a lot of different elements to this, but the bottom line here is basically this. The sun is not responsible for skin cancer. The sun can play a role if you are overexposed. And if you eat a terrible diet and have a terrible lifestyle otherwise, it's going to make that worse. When you look at the things that really move the needle on your mortality, though, it's not avoiding the sun. And that's where the sun and survival data becomes very interesting. So the melanoma in southern Sweden trial was a trial where they looked at the risk of melanoma and death based on sun exposure. And the patients who got the most sun had, the patients who smoked and had the most sun had the same risk of death as the people who did not smoke but lived indoors the most. And what that means essentially is that sun avoidance is a risk factor for all-cause mortality that's equivalent to smoking. So let that sink in. Most people, you ask them, would you smoke? Of course not. It's bad for you. Would you avoid the sun? Of course I would. It causes skin cancer. Hold on a minute. I just said 7,000 people a year die of melanoma in the United States. 12,000 in round numbers die of skin cancer in general. Yes, there are disfiguring surgeries people are going to have because they have basal cell or squamous cell on their nose, their cheek, etc. That's the price you pay for the sport you play. And if you'd rather have good-looking skin and run a higher risk of solid organ tumors or heart disease or other cancers or autoimmune diseases or allergies, then that's your choice. But make that choice understanding the trade-off. And the other element of this that I was going to talk about is the element of survival with melanoma. Well, before I get into that, let me give you some numbers as well on risk of death in general. So about 300, am I getting this right? No, it's about 3 million Americans die every year, plus or minus a couple 100,000. Do the math. What's 12,000 divided by 3 million? It's a very small number. So a vanishingly small proportion of people die of skin cancer. More people are killed by motor vehicle accidents. I haven't looked this up, but I'm sure more people are killed in violent crimes and homicides. I could be wrong about that, but that's my bet. And the other element to that as well is look at the top 10 causes of death. They're all linked to lack of sun exposure and low vitamin D levels. So right there, would you rather lower your risk for those top 10 causes of death that are most common, or would you rather lower your risk of a cause of death that's only 12,000 people per year?
I know where I'm putting my money.
Yeah, exactly. And there's
you can tell where I'm sitting.
I know. Yeah, right.
But here's the thing too about the skin aging thing. I think the people age their skin because they don't get enough morning and evening light.
On top of that, they're not eating the right nutrients. How many people do we see in the practice who they start eating more protein and they feel just worlds better?
Right. And they have the collagen, they have the resources to actually repair their skin, not to mention all the inflammation that refined garbage food causes.
Right.
And you have to use some discernment here. Like, we're not saying like, don't protect yourself from the sun if you're getting too much. Like when I'm in Nicaragua and it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I start feeling like I'm going to burn, I get in the shade. I mean, it's common sense. Like,
and I counsel this when I'm talking to people. They're like, well, look, I have red hair and I have the most pale skin of anyone you'll ever meet. And I say, look, I'm not telling you to go outside and burn. I'm not telling anyone to go get a sunburn. The electrical line workers, their data makes it very clear to me that consistent sun exposure is safe. It's safe and it's part of being healthy. So make it consistent. And like Jim is saying, getting morning light, getting evening light helps precondition your skin for the stress of the ultraviolet during the middle of the day. And it helps it recover if it takes too much damage from the UV. So the worst strategy is the one that most people are employing now. They get no sunlight in the early morning. They go out in the middle of the day if they are at the beach, occasionally on vacation, or they're, on the weekend, they're going to their friend's pool party or whatever. They get into their bikini, they get into their bathing suit, they roast, they may slather up with absolutely toxic, carcinogen containing sunscreens. They're using carcinogenic personal care products, whether it's perfumes or deodorants or lotions or whatever. And boom, they burn, they roast, they get a lot of skin damage, and then they end up with, skin cancers. And I've heard cases of people who their skin cancer problems went away, recurrent basal cell squamous cells. They went away when they stopped eating certain foods or they stopped using certain products. And this is where the dermatology literature is really anemic. It's pathetic. They don't actually ask really solid questions of what sunscreen should everyone be using. They just treat them all like they're the same. Well, these are very complex products with very complicated chemicals. And if you've ever looked at the side of a bottle of sunscreen, you'll realize that there's an enormous number of ingredients. And those ingredients, have perhaps unknown or unquantified effects on your skin. So the idea that we're just slathering up with this stuff because it has what is it? The UV or UV protection index?
Yes.
Whatever that is. I don't even know what it is.
You want to use 150. Got to use 50.
Right, exactly. Is bananas. And I remember getting
you might as well just rub motor oil on yourself.
I remember getting a skin rash when I was a kid, and it was due to the suntan lotion or the sunscreen we were using.
Yeah. What's the sunscreen you recommend? Is it Badger?
I like Badger products.
Okay.
Badger makes zinc oxide products that are all yeah, it's great. Okay, Monique has a great comment. I'm working with breast cancer women for 17 years. All of them, without exception, have vitamin D deficiency below 20. Monique, one of the interesting pieces of the literature on breast cancer is that it's one of the situations in which we've found that high doses of vitamin D do have a beneficial effect on mortality. And many cancer doctors, even conventional, will give their breast cancer patients 10,000 IU of vitamin D every day for that reason. So what I brought up on the screen here for those of you who are listening to this is one of the great studies that really shaped my thinking on this, entitled Sun Exposure and Mortality for Melanoma by Marianne Berwick and a bunch of other people whose names I won't rattle off here. You can read it if you want. This is from 2005, so this is not new. Okay, so this paper is really funny. It's really funny because the way that they phrase all of this is very weird. Okay. And I want to go through it for a minute so that we can really talk about what it means. So this purpose of the study was to evaluate the association between measures of skin screening and death from cutaneous melanoma. So they followed people with cutaneous melanoma for an average of more than 5 years. Okay. And they looked at things like intermittent sun exposure, perceived awareness of the skin self-screening, and physician screening. And then they looked at the risk of death from melanoma. Okay. What they found is sunburn, high intermittent sun exposure, skin awareness histories, and solar elastosis were statistically significantly inversely associated with death from melanoma. Okay. What is their conclusion? Sun exposure is associated with increased survival from melanoma. What does that mean? The more sun you get, the greater your survival will be if you've had melanoma.
But don't go in the sun; you'll get melanoma.
Yeah, and I remember in their conclusion, they have these really funny statements like, "We're not really sure why this is going on." I want to try and find it here because it's really funny.
While you're looking for that, Monique, Google Texas A&M breast cancer. It's going to pull up a study they did that basically looks at. They found that they looked at the Brexit gene, and they found that women that had a good circadian rhythm didn't pull the trigger for the breast cancer gene.
Yeah.
And the women that had broken circadian rhythms are the ones that got breast cancer. Of course, no one talks about all the studies linking cancer to circadian rhythm disruption, but check that out. I think you'll find it interesting.
So in this paper, they basically say that vitamin D may be the link between the sun exposure reducing your risk of death from melanoma. I think the thing that a lot of these, and this is one of the things that really frustrates me about academia, is these academics don't know about everything. And I have no problem with people not knowing anything about everything because it's a lot to know. But just knowing the different effects of different frequencies of sunlight on the skin gives you a wealth of information on why people might or might not have more melanoma with sun exposure, right? So first of all,
would you argue that maybe there's an agenda at play here as well?
If there is, I don't know exactly what level it's operating on. What I think people need to know is that unfortunately in academia, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has time to get its pants on. I think it was Winston Churchill who said that. But, another great example of this would be prostate cancer and testosterone. So you go to the average doctor and you say, hey, can we use testosterone, or what role does testosterone play in prostate cancer? And the average doctor will say, prostate cancer is made worse by testosterone. And that is total and complete hooey. It is nonsense. It has been thoroughly debunked in the literature by the experts, and not even experts at some podunk university who have some maverick take on this. I'm talking about the guys at Harvard, the most mainstream, conventional. I mean, I don't have a lot of respect for that institution anymore, and I'll just leave it at that. But this is not a controversial take if you actually bother to read the literature, but most doctors are 10, 20, 30 years behind the literature in a lot of cases, which is really sad. So my point with this, and when you look back at the reason for this, it all stems from this one urologist's paper on the topic, and no one ever did the real work to substantiate it, which is exactly the same thing we see with melanoma.
Well, that happened with the lipid. That happened with the lipid hypothesis too,
it's
right?
True. It's true. But with melanoma, as I was saying in the beginning, what happened was they said, wow, when we irradiate cells, they get damage with UVB light and UVA light. And that's true. But it's not the same to say, like, for example, when you go to the gym and you lift heavy weights, your muscles sustain damage. It doesn't mean that going to the gym is bad for you. In fact, weightlifting is strongly correlated with longevity. That's one of the reasons why in the Fundamentals of Wellness course, we included the addition of gym strength training. And this is why with the annual plans, we're currently overhauling them. We've paused admissions to them because we had to increase the price because of how much care we were providing people. And we're going to open that up later this month, for the record. And, if you're watching this in the future, listening to this in the future, it may be open again. It may not be. But the point is, I decided, okay, I want everyone in the program, everyone in the practice to have access to strength and conditioning training, because it's been so life-changing for me and my patients. And so what I was saying about melanoma risk, though, and why I think academia is long on this, is they don't understand how different frequencies of light affect the human body. And the reason they don't know this is that the agenda in medical school curricula is to push more drugs. Drugs, 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 drugs. The pharmaceutical industry long ago hijacked the medical industrial complex, basically top to bottom, from the mailroom to the C-suite. And they basically, it's subtle, but everything that's being done in research revolves around creating new products for pharmaceutical companies to market. And so people don't get basic. I mean, I spent years reading basic science work in areas that I'd never even heard of in medical school. And that brings me back to the literature on melanoma and photobiomodulation and different frequencies of light. So when you look back in the literature, particularly with the Navy studies of microwave and radio wave radiation, if I recall correctly, there was a researcher whose name escapes me right now, who found that there was an increased risk of melanoma in radar operators in the Navy.
That is correct. Nuclear submarine drivers too.
Oh, is that it? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And people might say, well, what about the nuclear radiation on the submarine? It's very well contained in the reactor, and those things are loaded with microwave radiation because they have to beam that radiation through the water to the base stations back in the United States so that they can communicate with their command. So we've got all this data, and I could go through it, but I mean, there's so much data on the role of microwave and radio wave radiation causing cancers. Small increases, 1 or 2 cases per 100,000 per 5 to 10 years. So very hard to detect. But when you add a cell phone, you add a Wi-Fi router, you add a Bluetooth, headset, you add a Bluetooth speaker, you add a, wireless fitness tracker. Speaking of which, I'm going to take off my Oura Ring and get the data from it. I wear it in airplane mode, for the record, because of this. So you look at all that, and no wonder melanoma rates are going up, despite the fact that people have moved indoors. And this is another fly in the ointment of the epidemiological literature. If the sun causes skin cancer, then why in the last 100 years, as people have moved indoors in record numbers and dropped their time outside from 90% to less than 3%, why on earth have skin cancer rates just gone up and up and up? For the last year and a half, Monique says, I've seen a lot of breast cancer in women under the age of 35. I'm not surprised. Look at where they hold their cell phones when they go for a run. They throw it under the bra strap. They've even got bras with like cell phone holders on them now. They put it on their arm, their deltoid or their upper bicep. It's not a mystery to those of us who know how all these things work, because we bothered to read the papers and actually look at what happened with patients. But getting back to the frequencies of light and their effects on the skin, red and infrared light are really powerfully healing to the body. One of the big questions in the photobiomodulation literature, the red and infrared light therapy literature, has been, do they increase the risk of cancer? Because they do technically increase proliferation rates and growth of tissue. But no matter where you look in the literature, you cannot find, and I defy anyone listening to this to find it, data where red and infrared light exposure increased your risk of cancer, which is one reason why we use it a lot in the head and neck cancer world, to mitigate the effects of things like radiation or to help with wound healing. And when you go up from there right into the visible light spectrum, it's very important to note that blue and green light induce the same lipid peroxidation that ultraviolet light induces in the skin, which is highly associated with cancers and degenerative illnesses. So why isn't unopposed blue and green light, invisible light, being blamed for the epidemic of skin cancers? It's creating a lot of the same damage, but it doesn't cause a burn, right? And people, pound for pound, are you exposed to more sunlight or are you exposed to more artificial light?
Right.
The average office worker is just under artificial light 95% of their day.
It's interesting. Women will pay thousands of dollars to a plastic surgeon, to a dermatologist, to go get a red light mask treatment. I'm getting a red light mask treatment right now for free.
Sure.
Out here in the morning. And it should be the warning that's on that beach in the picture should be in front of your TV screen you really should be covering up as much. It's the opposite of what you've been told.
TV is really interesting, though.
You should be covering up in front of when you're inside under fake lights, and you need to be uncovering yourself as much as possible when you go outside. Obviously, in the afternoon when the UV is peaked, then you might have to make some adjustments according to your skin type and your solar callus. But it's really, that was good. You zoomed that in good.
I did. Thank you. Yes.
Which button is that? Is that the one on the left over there?
Yeah, Monique, we're not surprised by that. Try not to get us banned from our social media platforms. I'm not even going to talk about this.
Good code word. Good code word.
The juice.
Well, they've been better off getting the real juice. That would have been better for them.
Juice as in testosterone?
Well, yeah. Well, not for women, but maybe primobolan, but not testosterone.
Oh, Jim.
Yeah. That side of me creeps out every once in a while.
Never a dull moment.
Kind of like a creepy spider.
Yeah. So I hope everyone, understands the risks, the benefits, the trade-offs, has a little bit of an idea of, what makes sense for solar exposure and what things you absolutely have to avoid. It doesn't take a lot of time digging into this literature to realize that there's more to it than just the sun causes skin cancer. And what I tell people is if the sun causes skin cancer, then spoons make people fat. And that doesn't make spoon destruction a good weight loss strategy. Yeah. So on that note, Jim, anything else you want to add?
I mean, a lot of this is common sense. I mean, if you just think about it, it's common sense. And a lot of people just unfortunately have lost that, mainly due to the fact they're spinning in their head. One thing I will say before we sign off is something I've been thinking about a lot with a lot of the stuff I've been working on myself lately.
Yeah.
If you're trying to make a change in your life, you're in a bad place. And I don't know why I'm being told to say this, but if you don't have a good relationship with yourself, if you don't love yourself and care for yourself, you're not going to be in a good place. You're going to sabotage yourself constantly. And two, you're never going to have a healthy relationship with other people unless you have a good relationship with yourself first. So I don't know why I said that, but if that is applicable to you, great. Check out all our links below. Stillman Wellness for the coaching side, Stillman MD for the medical side, thyroid webinars in there. Check out the live tomorrow morning with Allison Morrow, Dr. Stillman. It'll be streamed here. It'll be streamed on Facebook. I don't think it links to Twitter, does it, when you share the stream? No. So it's just Facebook and YouTube. Hopefully she'll get me a link to that so I can share it as well. So you can tune in to watch them, because that'll be a lot of fun. We got a busy day ahead of us.
Take care, everyone.
Lots of group calls. Take care. Get outside.